Hi everybody and welcome at the BaM live event. I'm Ben Vandenberghe, CEO at Skyline Communications, and it's my pleasure to welcome all of you. And let me also take the opportunity first to thank the IABM team for organizing and hosting this event. Because if there was ever a time to connect, to exchange thoughts, ideas and experiences, this would probably be it. Now, today is the Architect Day. As the tagline reads, today is about the science of designing media supply chains. Or should we maybe say the art of designing and shaping entire media businesses? Because, as you know, this industry is going through quite some fundamental changes. A first thing, for example, that is very important to understand is that today it is no longer simply about understanding the technology and being able to use that technology. Today, it is much more about what you will do with that technology. This means, for example, also that technology is no longer something that should be exclusively owned by an isolated engineering department. No, today, technology needs to be owned, embraced by the entire organization. And there must be a clear consensus in the first place about what it is that you want to achieve. And that's why I refer to this as the art of creating and shaping an entire media business, rather than just creating workflows. Today, building and designing the technology stack for your organization, that's like creating the DNA for your business. And as we all know, DNA will ultimately determine how your business is going to look like, what its strengths and weaknesses are, and much more. And this should not really come as a surprise to anybody, because what you see in the media industry is happening literally everywhere around you. The political landscape, the global economy, the finance industry, or even interpersonal relationships that we all have, you always see the exact same thing. And that's hyper-connected ecosystems. And again, this is really applying to everything, whether you look at the entire global media industry or your own company, all the way down to your new technology platforms, it's all the same. And that means that all these ecosystems are by definition complex systems. And therefore, it's very important in the first place to really understand the exact nature of what you are dealing with. Complex ecosystems bring us a lot of opportunity. They are very flexible, scalable, and resilient. And you can have a major incident or a major failure in such an ecosystem, and it will absorb it and will remain fully functional. And it offers you, of course, tremendous potential in the sense that you can do pretty much anything that you can imagine and even beyond that. But also, as always in life, there are no opportunities without challenges. And it's equally important to be very aware of those. Security, for example, is a big concern in a hyper-connected, complex ecosystem. And that applies to the global finance industry as much as it applies to your media business. Again, all the way down to your all IP deployments, for example. Complex ecosystems also exhibit non-linear behavior. Very important. Because this means that a small change in such an ecosystem can actually result in a very unexpected, massive impact on the entire ecosystem. And again, this applies as much to a single tweet being sent out into the world in a social ecosystem, as much as it does apply to a single PTP setting on a switch in your all IP ecosystem. It is simply the nature of a complex ecosystem. And then there's also complexity, for example. These ecosystems, they are simply something that we as humans cannot wrap our heads around. This requires innovative new approaches, and hence also, for example, the rise of AI-powered technologies. Now, to make a long story short here, one of the most important things is really to expect the unexpected in this kind of environment. In fact, you really should assume that nothing can be taken for granted. If your decisions are based on certain assumptions, you better wonder about what it would mean if that assumption would be wrong. There are plenty of examples of major disruptions in the recent years, and you can be sure that many will be following. And that's why agility is so important. And I know everybody will say that they are fully aware of this. But then again, it is one of those things that is still being overlooked so easily when we make day-to-day decisions, including technology decisions. And let us zoom in a little bit on that. We all know that as an industry, we are increasingly moving from legacy bespoke technology with well-defined workflows, often even engraved into them, to a software ICT ecosystem where pretty much everything is possible. And while this is not mainstream ICT, because it really requires still very specific media-related expertise and considerations, nevertheless, a lot of the principles from the mainstream ICT business start being applicable. And those are very fundamental changes for all of us. Changes that affect pretty much everything that you can think of. It affects the way we architect the systems, we design them, the way we deploy them, and much more. To give you one example, change management. It has very little to do with the actual technology, but lack of proper change management is one of the major risks for this type of projects. And yes, you can perfectly avoid that specific challenge by taking your old workflows and transposing them into the new environment. But in that case, you're missing the whole point of this. Because again, all IP, virtualization, cloud services, they are all enabling technologies. And what you are trying to achieve is to build an agile media platform, not just replicating yesterday's business. You are transforming your organization into a data-driven ecosystem. And let us zoom in a little bit further on that, and let's paint the bigger overall picture that we are looking at here. At the bottom, you have that enabling technology. All IP, virtualization, cloud services, they're all there. But that is not the most important thing. After all, as I said, it is perfectly possible for you to take whatever you always had in the past and hard code all of that straight into that lower stack. But doing that means that you really did not understand the point of all of this. In fact, these days, your past experiences, they're not necessarily your biggest asset. They can actually easily turn out to be your biggest enemy, especially if you're suddenly up against some new kids on the block who will have an entirely new perspective on all of this. Now, if you need to build an agile operation, you will understand that a bigger challenge really sits right on top of that. And that's deciding on how you will actually leverage that enabling technology. How are you going to maintain an inventory of all those resources? How will you onboard new resources? How will you evolve firmware and software versions on all those components? How are you going to easily provision services across the entire ecosystem end to end? How are you going to keep track of availability and utilization of all those resources and optimize the utilization? How will you manage the health status and so much more? How are you going to build all those different types of technology workflows in there? And don't be mistaken, this is a major undertaking. If this is your first venture into this kind of setup, you will probably be burning more resources and time than on any other project in the past. And there are a lot of different options here to tackle this kind of challenge, all with their own advantages and disadvantages. And you will have to carefully consider all of them. But it is a major undertaking. And again, you could avoid all of that, but then you effectively choose for speed and not really for agility. And this is not where it stops. Before you move ahead on anything, you really need to carefully consider what it is that you ultimately want to achieve as a media business. So you really have to consider this from the top down and not from the bottom up. And if you know that you have to expect the unexpected, you will understand that this boils down to what you see there on the top. Firstly, being able to transform and evolve your products and services easily, irrespective whether that's driven by new business models, changing demands, or anything else. Secondly, being able to easily optimize your operation in many different ways to withstand the continuously changing competitive landscape. But it's also about being able, for example, to engage with your customers in ways that you cannot imagine yet. And that's irrespective whether we are talking about the delivery of a very expensive high-end contribution service just to a few customers, or if we are talking about delivering your OTT services to millions of end users. And last but not least, in a data-driven world, it is also very much about empowering all your employees, everybody in the organization, giving them access to the data and to allow them to leverage that data. And you should really not underestimate how all of these very general objectives will crystallize and become a reality in practice in the coming years. Because it is very likely that this will be in ways that you have not imagined yet. Now have a look at your employees, for example. Companies are transforming into agile networks of talents that collaborate continuously. We no longer talk about individual ownership, but about DevOps squads with shared objectives. We face changing working habits and changing expectations from employees. You have a war on talent because you need more and more experts in different domains, and everybody wants them, and much more. And what does that then really mean in terms of how people need to interact with that entire ecosystem down there? and look at the workflows. We talked about some of the technology workflows down there at the bottom to create an agile technology stack, but you also have operational workflows sitting right on top of that. And then you have business workflows again on top of that. And today, a lot of those are connected by people. But surely you can see already how all of these will start blending together, cutting out those people. And even more than that, these workflows will actually start extending more and more beyond the boundaries of your own organization. So just to summarize all of this, today, you are not just in charge of technology and building workflows. Today, you are effectively the architect of your entire media business. You are creating the DNA of your media business. What you decide, the way you do it, the choices that you make, they are very definitive for how your business is going to look like and how resilient it will be. Now, the only thing then remaining for me here really is to wish everybody all the best with all of your endeavors and to enjoy the event program here that the IABM has prepared for you. Thank you very much.